Chapter 12 starts with whom? All right, Abraham, his story goes from 12. His son Isaac doesn't really have a whole lot that is just his. Chapter 26, I believe, is the chapter that he gets. And then you move forward with Jacob's story, really, from there, until the story focuses on whom? All right, it really focuses on Joseph at the end, with what character kind of being the real, under the radar main character, protagonist. Judah. Judah really is the one who goes through the great evolution of character starting in chapter 37, moving forward. So 37 through the rest of Genesis is about Joseph, and Judah is also there. But there was one aspect that I wanted to bring up, and this kind of goes, it's an observation that Jan made a few weeks ago. There seems to be times that there is at least a mention of focus on a particular part of the story. Jan, do you remember what you said a few weeks ago that I was like, hold on to that thought? Okay. Okay, all right, very good. It has to do with the garment, the coats. You see clothing that's mentioned multiple times in this story. And I think that there's something really interesting about that if you follow that thread throughout the story. The thread. The coat thread. Never mind. All right. Tough crowd tonight. Okay. All right. So, if you begin Genesis chapter 37 and verse 3, what is the first garment that we see? This one's an easy one, right? All right, his coat of many colors, or remember we talked about this, the coat with long sleeves, or whatever it is. What was the point of that coat, though? Okay, to set him apart, to put him, demonstrate that he is in a place of authority. And so you have then the coat of, we're just going to call it the coat of many colors. That's what you guys you can follow that, right? You know what that means? All right, the coat of many colors really starts at the beginning, and that's kind of the type of garment that a ruler would wear. What happened to that coat, though? Okay, it was taken from him, right? And so, does he continue to wear the clothing of a ruler at that point? No. That is taken from him. Remember, we know very particularly that it was ripped up, dipped into blood, and demonstrated, given back to the father. All right, as we move forward, he has a new garment that is mentioned, and this is in chapter 39 and verse 16. What's this new garment that's mentioned? The garment of a what? What's that? What'd you say, Jason? Well, the master of the home comes home to see this, but what is the garment, though? Verse 15 and 16. I mean, you see it up as well. Verse 12. Okay, outer garment, but who wears this garment? Joseph. Who is a what? He's a servant. So this is a servant's clothing, right? So now he wears the clothing of a servant. That is taken away. And where does he then go? Prison. He goes into prison. The next time that garments are mentioned is in chapter 41 and verse 14. And there's just a brief phrase that's used that really demonstrates you have two different garments in play. First of all, they changed his clothes from what? Jason just said it, but the clothing of a prisoner, which, by the way, the word for prison that's used here, or at least one of the times that it talks about him being in prison, is the word for pit, which should sound familiar in the Joseph story, the idea of the pit. But the word for pit also is the word for what? Well, yes, but death. You know, it's within the Psalms and such. It's used in parallel with death itself. So the pit or death you find together. Now, he changes out of this, he shaves and changes his clothing into what? Not a ruler yet. He changes his clothing to go before Pharaoh. So what clothing would he wear to go before Pharaoh? Servant. We're back to servant clothing. Before, now, once he's done doing what he does with Pharaoh, we have the next mention of clothing in chapter 41 and verse 42. Now what does he receive? All right, so now he has the clothing of a ruler, right? So if you follow the story of the clothing in Joseph, you kind of have the coat of many colors, which is the clothing of a ruler, which then is taken away so that he becomes a servant. From the point of a servant, Joseph then goes into the prison, wears the clothes of a prisoner, or the clothing of death, from which he comes out of that to, again, for a very brief period of time, wear the clothing of a servant, before he then is exalted once again to the clothing of a ruler. Does that strike anybody in any way? What does that look like? Doesn't it? Philippians chapter 2, isn't it? The one who had equality with God, he served as the ruler, he was there on high, but he didn't regard it as something to hold on to himself. Instead, he took the form of what? He took the form of a bondservant and was made in the likeness of man, and he was obedient even to the point of what? Even to the point of death itself. But did he stay there in death? No. For a small period of time, does he not come out of death and take on the form of a servant for a very brief period of time before he is what? He is highly exalted, whose name is above every name, so that every name and every tongue would confess Jesus is Christ, above in the heavens, the earth, and under the earth, right? Can you see the flow of Jesus and what he does just by looking at the garments in the story of Joseph? It's kind of neat, isn't it? Just to see these little details that are thrown in there. And you know, it's there. It's not in your face. It's not shoving it, at you. In fact, it's really easy to completely miss it. But it's there when you dig and you find it. It's kind of interesting, isn't it? It's a neat way to look at the story of Joseph and how it is a parallel for the story of Jesus. Because everything that Jesus goes through is what Joseph has gone through, to the point that at the end, when confronted by the sinfulness of his brothers, and they come up to him And they're like, oh man, you weren't there, but when Dad died, he wanted to make sure that you knew that he didn't want you to kill us, right? This is, by the way, in chapter 50. So, excuse me, verse 16, they sent a message to Joseph saying, your father gave this command before he died. Say to Joseph, please forgive the transgression of your brothers and their sin, because they did evil to you. And now please forgive the transgression of the servants of the God of your father. What's the very next thing that Joseph does when confronted by sinfulness? Joseph wept. Yep, good job, Joshua. It's exactly right. Joseph wept. Jesus ever do that? He does so when what? All right, when the death of Lazarus comes, and he doesn't weep because he feels bad about Lazarus. He knows what he's going to do with Lazarus, right? He's not weeping over Lazarus. He's weeping when he comes face to face with what it is that sin does. It's not the way that it's supposed to be. And so some of these promises here that Joseph makes, he tells them, do not fear. For am I in the place of God? As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people would be kept alive as they are today. Verse 21, do not fear, I will provide for you and your little ones. Thus he comforted them and spoke kindly to them. He made sure that they knew, that they understood he was there to take care of them. And with this, we bring the story of Joseph to an end. Joseph remained in Egypt. All the rest of them, the family, has moved down, by the way. Does anybody know the number of people who moved down from where they were up in the land of Canaan down to Egypt? What's that? I think it was 70. What would have been the number? About 70 people come down. Judah's the one who arranges it, takes care of it. It's not Joseph bringing them down. It's Judah who brings them down. And then you just have this, in verse 24, Joseph said to his brothers, I'm about to die, but God will visit you and bring you out of this land to the land that he swore to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob. Verse 25, Joseph made the sons of Israel swear, God will surely visit you, and you shall carry up my bones from here. So Joseph died, being 110 years old. They embalmed him, and he was put in a coffin in Egypt. Yes?
To answer your question about how many, it says in chapter 46, verse 27, and the sons of Joseph who were born, that's who were born to him in Egypt. Now the sons of Joseph who were born to him in Egypt were two. All the persons of the house of Jacob who came to Egypt were seven.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Very good. Yep. And so those are the ones who come down. And remember before, Joseph was all about creating a new life separate from his father, separate from everyone else in Egypt. Well, now that life has come to him in Egypt. And so it seems, if this is as far as we get, that they're nicely settled in and ready to go and to create a brand new life in Egypt, except for one thing. What's the promise that Joseph made? Or what was it that Joseph made them promise? I think I said that right. All right, to carry his bones out of Egypt. It's a really interesting thing. First of all, what might he be concerned is going to happen to his bones? What's his position? Yeah, he's almost on the same level as a Pharaoh itself. So, high level, like very high level, really important types of people, he's scared they're going to do something for him, probably. Because they do that a lot for Egyptian rulers and such. Not that they would necessarily build a huge pyramid for him, but perhaps something. And he says that's not going to be what's going to happen. How does he know that God is going to bring the people out of Egypt? Kelly?
From the place that God promised to Abraham.
All right. Yeah. They knew the promises, what it is that God had promised to your descendants. I will give this land. Remember, we had that discussion. And even then, you go back to Genesis chapter 15. This is in the same chapter where God said, count the stars. If you can, so shall your descendants be. And Abraham believed God. It was credited to him as righteousness. You keep on going. And verse 12, as the sun was going down, a deep sleep fell on Abram. This is Genesis 15:12. Behold, dreadful and great darkness fell upon him. The Lord said to Abram, know for certain, your offspring will be sojourners in a land that is not theirs, and they will be servants there. They will be afflicted for 400 years, but I will bring judgment on the nation they serve. Afterward they shall come out with great possessions. As for you, you shall go to your fathers in peace. You shall be buried in a good old age, and they will come back here in the 4th generation, for the iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. What does that mean? The iniquity of the Amorite is not yet complete. That's a weird phrase, isn't it? Y'all talked about this one before? Spent some time with it? Yeah, Kelly?
They're not ready for a smiting yet.
Okay. Who's the Amorite? Yeah, Isaac?
The Amorites were some of Lot's kids, so they were distant relationships to the Israelites.
Okay. All right. So these are people, though, yeah, I want to make sure, I'm going to have to double check on that it's and not Ammonites that you might be thinking of, but but these are all peoples that are in this general area right here. And by the way, I think Amorite right here, and this kind of goes to what Isaac is getting at, in this peoples in this area, these are other people who live in this Canaan, what we know of as the land of Canaan, the land of Palestine. And it's not just Amorites. There's a whole bunch of ites. And if you were to read through various places, you'll find all these different ites and peoples that live there. He just uses Amorites as a synecdoche, right? We've talked about that word. One of the whole that represents the whole thing. So the Amorites would be one of, and it's just kind of used for all of them. But it's basically saying that the people who live in this land, well, I don't know what I did with my marker. Oh, I'm using it as a marker, place marker. All right. It's saying that the people that live in this land right here, what's going to happen to them eventually? Kelly said the time of smiting, right? But why would they get to the time of smiting? Okay, unfaithfulness. What's the word that he uses there? Their wickedness or their iniquity, right? Their sinfulness. In other words, God is saying, it's not too bad right now, but in the future, people in this land are going to go through a downward spiral of wickedness, of debauchery, of problems. And he says, when that happens, he doesn't want what? He doesn't want them to be there. Good job. Exactly right, Samuel. So he pulls the people of Abraham down here so that they can continue their wickedness, continue their downward spiral of sinfulness until such a time that their wickedness or their iniquity is complete and it's time for judgment. Who's going to be used for that judgment? All right, Moses, sort of, but Israel, right? Keep in mind, Moses isn't going to actually technically be the one to go across, but yeah, he's going to use the people of Israel to bring the judgment that they have brought upon themselves because of their wickedness and because of their iniquity when the time is right. So what happens when they come down here? When they come down here, is everything nice and hunky-dory for them? Okay, they get turned into slaves. We come to Exodus chapter 1. And it says here in Exodus chapter 1, verse 6, Joseph died, and all his brothers, and all that generation. But the people of Israel were fruitful and increased greatly. They multiplied and grew exceedingly strong, so the land was filled with them. And verse 8, what happens? All right, now there arose a new king over Egypt who what? He did not know Joseph. Now we're entering a new phase. So what is this new king who does not know Joseph? He looks at this big old group of people and he starts thinking what?
They're going to multiply and take over.
All right, if they keep on going, this is a serious threat here. Whether they would uprise and go against Egypt or whether they would join with some outward or outside nation that would come in, that there would be some serious issues that could take place if these people are left unchecked. And they present quite a good workforce. There's a lot of them. So, in order to keep them in check, he enslaves them. Now, understand this, that if they go into slavery down here, what's the message that God is giving across by bringing them down here, even if it puts them into slavery? Got to do putting some 2 and 2 together on this one. Remember, why did he bring them out of here again? No, that was the means by which he did it, but why did he bring them out? All right, so it's because of the iniquity or the sinfulness of the people in this land. So he brought them out of that and brought them into a place where they would become slaves. What does that tell us? Okay, basically the idea, as God looks at it, the slavery here, which is slavery to what? Slavery to sinfulness and getting caught up in the wickedness and the iniquity. This slavery is worse than this one. That God would rather bring them out of a place where they might be cush, live good lives, everything's fine, everything's feel good, but they're living in total, complete sinfulness. He'd rather bring them out of that and bring them in a hard life. He'd rather that than for them to just simply live in sin. Does that make sense? It is better for them to go into slavery than it is to remain in a sinful place. Can you see that message that he's giving? I'm seeing a lot of people that are just staring at me. Am I not coming across here? Do I need to try a different approach? Yeah, Kelly?
I understand what you're saying. I've just never heard this before.
Okay.
This is new, so I'm processing.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Kelly. So Kelly's explaining at least his blank face on that one. Yes. Yes. Okay. All right. You want to say that again into the mic? So.
It makes me think about their statement of wanting to go back to Egypt after they leave.
Yes.
Because they know that, and that is an easier physical, something they can understand and handle better than the change in the spiritual, the mental, the whole change into worship. Makes me think a little.
Yeah.
It's a hard thing they were looking at to make that change, and as human beings, we don't always want to make those changes that are hard to do.
Yeah, and you definitely see that later as God brings them out, and they want to go back to where they were, because I think from what Jan is saying, it's sometimes easier once you get yourself settled into a certain way of living, of doing things, that you would rather just continue in that. So yeah, this is, I think, what we're supposed to pull out of, them going into their Egyptian bondage, their Egyptian slavery, is that God is really, this is a right-in-your-face way of saying, this is better than this. Physical slavery is better than setting yourself up for slavery to sin. And he pulls them out very specifically so they can avoid that. All right. So, yes, John, wait for the mic. It's coming.
I see a whole bunch of types and antitypes here. We just talked about one with Joseph and Christ. Mm-hmm. But short term, it could be that there's a type and an antitype between Joseph and God's going to send a Savior for these people now. They're going to go out of slavery into being saved, being servants for God, and then they're going to be given the chance to do great things. And it just didn't, that scenario is carried through all through the history of nations clear into the apostles. They talk about Moses. Mm-hmm. They talk about him going into Pharaoh and how these people were like the sands of the seas by this time in their minds. They had grown up to be so many people, which is a fulfillment of prophecy there, that they found out that God was going to save them and he was able to take care of them and guide them, and if they just trust in the Lord. Mm-hmm. Moses was the greatest prophet of all until John the Baptist. Did I quote that right?
Yeah, well, yes. You could even say until Jesus.
And two of the greatest men of the world in the history of the Bible, here they are at this time period.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, going to Moses being that prophet, Deuteronomy chapter 18 really talks about, Moses says that when I'm gone, there's going to be another prophet. God will raise up a prophet like me who will have the kind of relationship that I have with God. And we keep getting notices as we move through some of these books of history that prophet has as of yet not shown up. So that's exactly right, that although we haven't really introduced him yet, so we might as well introduce him, right? No, you weren't the only one. And so, yeah, as we get into Exodus, a new king comes up that does not know Joseph. What does that mean? He doesn't know Joseph. You would think that a lot of kings didn't know Joseph, right? Yeah. Go ahead, Serena.
He doesn't know the history behind everything that Joseph did.
Yeah. He doesn't, the idea is he doesn't know what Joseph did. Why does this, large group of people have this place of prominence within Egypt. They have the land of Goshen is where they are, which is nice fertile land up near the delta. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And this is probably an indication that we're looking at one of those times that an outside entity overtook the rulers that were right here in the delta area. Probably one of the times in which you have, I'm going to get these mixed up. I want to say this was the high and this is the low, but it might be the high kingdom, the low kingdom. I might have mixed that up. And there are times where they unite together in their history and become one kind of stronger kingdom. This is probably one of those times that they become a stronger kingdom together. And so you have a king from the south who comes up, and now he's the king over all of it, and he knows nothing about Joseph, their God, what they've done. It's been a long time, and these people have been seemingly breeding like rabbits since then. There's a whole bunch of them, and he's like, this is a good slave force, let's use them. But what does he want to do with the male children? Kill them. That's right. First he tells the midwives to kill them. They won't do it. And then he's like, all right, well, here's the new thing. Anytime that anybody sees a little Hebrew baby boy, toss him into the Nile River. That'll do it. That'll get rid of them, right? Why just the boys? It seems a little sexist, doesn't it?
Slows down the birth rate.
Okay, maybe slows down the birth rate a little bit. All right, Samuel just said they could become warriors. If the fear is that these people might rise up or help an uprising, help an enemy, whatever the case, then cut down their fighting men. And you do that by getting rid of the boys. This is a military strategy, is what it is that Pharaoh's trying to accomplish. So let's get rid of the boys. And people are complying, including a mother who throws her baby into the Nile River. She just happens to put the baby in something first, right? So she does what she's supposed to do, but she builds, it's the same word, by the way, as ark, Noah's ark, right? She builds an ark for the baby, puts the baby in there, and sends it floating on the Nile. And who finds this baby? Okay, the daughter of Pharaoh. All right. Anybody know who it is that we are talking about right now?
Moses.
Yeah, this is Moses, right? The word to pull out or draw out or something like that sounds like Moses. The word, lifting up out of something. And so that is the name that's given. She says, because I drew him out of the water. However, she is unable to nurse this child. So what does she have to do? Well, this is before the days of bottle feeding, so it's a good guess, though. Yes, it was good try on that one. You have to find a mother who just lost a child. Are there mothers who have just lost their children? Yeah. There's one in particular who happened to have just thrown her son into the water, and whose daughter is standing around watching to see what happens. And she just happens to say to the lady who drew him out of the water, Pharaoh's daughter, I know just the woman. Who is that? It's Pharaoh's. Yes, it's not Pharaoh's mother. It's Moses' own mother. So Moses' mother has the opportunity until he is weaned, so this is a few years, has the opportunity to teach him concerning who they are What is their heritage? What is their history? Who he is, how he's special, all of that type of stuff under the employment of Pharaoh and the employment and protection of Pharaoh, because this is now Pharaoh's daughter's child. All right, moving forward in our narrative, we come to a point in time in which this Moses has to make a decision. Moses grows older, and he knows who his people are. And so one day, verse 11, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people, looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his people, one of his brothers. So, what did he do? He killed him. Yeah, he struck him down and he killed him. He looked this way and that first, though, right? Thinking that nobody saw it, hid the person in the sand. He goes the next day, and two Hebrews, two of his brothers, were struggling together, and he steps in between them. He's like, hey guys, come on. You shouldn't be fighting each other. And what do they answer? All right, who made you the prince? Who made you the ruler over us? Do you mean to kill me the same way that you killed the Egyptian? Now, what is Moses' title? Position, status? He's prince. He's kind of a ruler over the people, right? So, what are they basically saying to him? Okay, kind of like what Joseph's brothers said to him. All right, go ahead and expound on that just a little bit. Mike's coming. It's right there.
I think it's interesting at the end of the scenario with Joseph that the brothers came up to him and they knew they were in really, really deep muck when he made his identity known to them, because they know what they had done just previously when they came in to ask for grain in the first place. They bowed down on the floor to him. They didn't forget the dream. They understood the dream for what it meant. They didn't argue the dream in the first place. They just said, you think we're going to bow down before you? And I think that's the attitude of this guy. When he looks at Moses, he says, who are you? Are we to bed? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so there is, I think, some of that. There's a refusal to recognize. Go ahead, Kelly.
I think they're basically saying, you're not our prince.
Yeah.
You're a prince of Egypt.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, I think that's exactly it. They are rejecting Moses as their rightful ruler, as their rightful leader. Now, why does Moses at this point run away? Oh, by the way, when Moses found out about this, he was afraid and thought, surely this thing is known. And so Moses fled from the Pharaoh and stayed in the land of Midian. All right. So why does Moses run away? All right. So it was known that Moses had killed this Egyptian. Pharaoh heard of it, and he sought then to kill, probably put Moses on trial, execute him, for this murder that had taken place. We don't do this very often. But let's go up to Acts. Acts chapter 7. What's happening in Acts chapter 7? Let's go back to Mike's class here. Y'all remember what's happening in Acts chapter 7?
Stephen's defense.
All right, so this is Stephen's speech that he gives before the Sanhedrin council, right? They bring him before them, and so he says, he starts going through their history, right? Now, as you move down through, he eventually is going to start talking about Moses. Acts chapter 7, verse 20, At this time, Moses was born, and he was beautiful in God's sight. And he was brought up for 3 months in his father's house, and when he was exposed, Pharaoh's daughter adopted him, brought him up as her own son. Moses was instructed in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was mighty in words and deeds. When he was 40 years old, it came into his heart to visit his brothers, the children of Israel. Seeing one of them being wronged, he defended the oppressed man, avenged him by striking down the Egyptian. He supposed what? What did he assume? Verse 25, Acts 7, verse 25. Okay, he supposed that these Hebrews would understand that God was giving them salvation by his hand. In other words, when Moses goes out and kills this Egyptian, what is he actually doing? Say it again for the folks in the back. Oh, I forgot. It's Sean. Louder. Yell it. All right. Did you guys hear that? No. Okay. Yeah. He's trying to start a revolution. This isn't just a man who happened to come out and be like, oh no, look at this bad treatment that's happening. Boy, this has really fired me up and I'm going to do something about it. Now, this is a very pointed decision by a man who understands, he gets it. He understands that he has been placed in this place of prominence for a reason. That he has been given all the leadership, understanding, and everything that the Egyptians, one of the strongest nations that is known, has to offer. And yet he is part of the Hebrew people, and he understands that he is given a very special relationship and opportunity to lead them out of this oppression. And what happened? They rejected him. All right, this isn't just some people saying, who are you? These are people, this is a people who are telling him, we will not follow you. You're not our prince. You are not our ruler. And he has already made his commitment. The moment that he killed that Egyptian was the moment that he decided, I am about the revolution. I am about leading the people out. This is what I'm focused on. He put his Egyptian life behind him, and he took on the mantle of Savior, and they rejected him. Can he go back to his Egyptian life? No. Can he be the Savior for the people of Israel? All right. Well, no, right? He can't be. They reject him. This is a big fat no. You guys are talking from knowing the end of the story. Forget the end of the story, right? Moses is 40 years old right now. Can he lead the people out? No, he can't, can he? Because they refuse him. They reject him. He's got nowhere to go except to run away. And so he does. And he flees. He goes out to another place, to another land, and marries the daughter of a priest. I don't know. Are you guys seeing any connections with any stories? You know, someone who's rejected by his brothers, his family, and he's kind of sent off to another place, marries the daughter of a priest. Yeah, we're seeing kind of a Joseph narrative forming again, creates a brand new life for himself where he just forgets everything that's behind him because he's been rejected by that life completely, and he starts a brand new life with children and everything else moving forward. You're seeing this, right? How we're moving from Joseph's story now into a Moses story, which is carrying a lot of those exact same types moving forward. You're seeing these kinds of repetitions. And so as he goes to Midian, how long does he stay there in Midian? All right, and about another 40 years. So, keep in mind, this is the same guy who said that a man's life would span about how long? 70. If he's lucky, he'll get 80. How old is he right now? He's 80. Yeah, we got a question or comment right here. Mike's coming. Yeah, what you got, Serena?
Is there a significance to the number 40?
Yeah. Yeah, it's all over the place. And it's, pretty early on, as early as, the flood narrative, and continues on throughout the entirety of the Bible, especially when it comes to years. The idea of a generation is about, given usually about like 40 years or so. But yeah, it's one of the really important numbers that you find within the Bible. And so, I don't think it's just a coincidence that Moses' life breaks down into 3 40-year time periods. But he doesn't start.
Wilderness 40 days, or fasted for 40 days, and when you see 40 a lot.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Yep, that's exactly right. And in particular with Moses, like you mentioned, he was up on the mountain for 40 days, fasting, before coming back. This should be telling to us, especially, Mike's not here tonight. I'll just pick on Dale then, sorry. Maybe Mike's listening in, I don't know. But those of you who might be getting up in age just a little bit, right? And you might be wondering, is my usefulness going to continue to some degree? Well, God didn't show up in a burning bush with Moses until the guy was 80 years old. And when he shows up in a burning bush, and by the way, that would have been a fun event, right? I mean, you see a bush that's burning, but it's not being consumed. And so your natural inclination is to do what? Toss water on it? No. Maybe. Yeah. Moses' natural inclination is to get as close as he can to it, right? To approach it. He's like, let me come see what this thing is. And basically what God is telling him is, hey, you remember what you tried to do 40 years ago? It's time to do it. Moses was not wrong when he was 40 years old. Was he going to be the one to start the revolution and bring the people out? Yes. All right, now you can say it. Those of you who said yes when I asked, could he do it? And you were like, well, yes, or not yet, or later. Now you can say it. Because we've got 40 years that have transpired. Moses, at the age of 40, could he have done it? No. The people rejected him. They wouldn't follow him. And most importantly, who was not involved? God was not involved. God's not the one who said to Moses, hey, why don't you go to those people and do this? Moses is the one that said, hey, I feel like I should go to these people and do this. You see the difference? Now, there's been 40 more years of maturation that's taken place. And now you've got Moses, 80 years old, and he's got his new family, everything else. And so now at this point, God shows up and says, all right, now it's time. And Moses, he's like, well, hot diggity dog, let's go, right? No, he's like, what are you talking about? Why would he be scared to do it? Why would he be so concerned about the people who wouldn't listen to him? They would reject him. They wouldn't follow him. What's that? Because that's what they did before. They've already told him they're not going to follow him. They've already put him through this rejection. He has already put himself out there to lead the people, and they've already said, you're not our prince. You're not our ruler. That's why he says, when I go back, I'm going to have to go back with authority. Who am I going to tell them sent me? Because if I go back under my own word, they've already rejected that. They've already told me they don't want that. I'm going to have something bigger than me if I'm going to go back and tell them. And that's where God says, yeah, you will. And you have something bigger. You tell them that the I am one has sent you. And by the way, that doesn't necessarily mean the ever-existing one, which is how I've thought that was for years upon years, that, the I am means that he's just the eternal ever-existing one. It has with it the connotation, I am what I will be. Or, I will be what I will be. It has more to do, not with God's existence, it has more to do with God's action. The same way that I have always been, which, by the way, how has God demonstrated who he is? How has he done it? Just by telling people who he is? No, it's by stepping into the lives of Abraham and Sarah, stepping into the lives of Isaac and Rebekah, stepping into the lives of Jacob and his wives and his children, stepping into Joseph's life, doing all of these things. He's a God of action, not a God of words. He's not just a God that exists. He's a God that proves that he is with his people, and he always will be with his people. And when Moses says, who is this? He says, I am who I have always been, and that's who I will always be. A God of action, of relationship with my people. That's the significance of Yahweh or Jehovah. It's not just that there's some God out there who exists, has always existed, and will always exist. It's that he is a God who enters into covenant relationships with his people, and he always is faithful to those covenants. That is the significance of Yahweh. Does that make sense? All right, so this is where we're out of time, and we're going to pick up next week with the burning bush and then move forward with what it is that Moses does from here. Questions or comments? All right.